He's the photograph. We're talking to Corin Forrester from their Cape Ontario community. It was selected on Festival Show at the Environmental Photography Exhibit at the American Mountain Center last November 2011. Hi, Corin. Why don't we start off by telling us how you got over photography?
My father took a lot of photographs when I was young, lots of black and white, and did some work in the darkroom, but I was never able to really participate with that with him. Photographs were always a big part of my family, and then I was given some cameras, and I enjoyed taking photographs, but my background is science. I went to study microbiology at university, so it wasn't until later that I went traveling and in New Zealand and was just, of course, struck by the beauty there and really enjoying taking photographs in those beautiful places.
Why don't you talk about your introduction to nature?
I've always spent a lot of time outdoors. I went to some children's camps as a kid and got introduced to canoe tripping, and then I later worked at a camp where I would lead camping trips into Algonquin Park here in Ontario, and it was a camp that was sort of focused on three things: respect for yourself, respect for others, and respect for the environment, and that was quite key, I think. So, for example, the camp didn't have any power boats, and they had a lot of kind of ecology-minded programming, and we did a lot of canoe tripping, taking kids into the backcountry for 8 or 9 days. And so that sort of exposure to pretty wild places and taking a camera into those wild places, I would say that was pretty formative for me. Well, I grew up in a pretty remote area. The town of Westport, where I grew up, was a town of 700 people, but we lived quite a distance out of town on 5 acres of land where my parents built a log house that they had recycled. It was like a 140-year-old log house, and they were given the house if they could move it off this farm. So they rebuilt this log house on a new foundation, and we had 5 acres, but there were hundreds of acres of wild land behind that. So certainly, family hikes in the woods as a kid, that was definitely pretty formative for me, as well as the going to camp and learning to canoe camp and that sort of thing. I think throughout my university career, there were just a number of different ways in which I was just learning more generally about what was going on in the world. And I actually had a pretty interesting first-year program called Academia that was all integrated art science, and it really exposed me to a lot of different ideas that I might not have been exposed to had I just been in a science program. And one of those courses called Writing the Biosphere, and it was all about English literature, but from the perspective of different cultures and how they regard the environment and how they treat it. And that was a pretty interesting course to really start getting me thinking about things that we do to the environment. Well, I think there actually was a pretty big aha moment that happened for me, and that was actually when I studied black and white photography at the Halliburton School of the Arts here in Ontario. It's a very small art school, and they had just recently started up an all darkroom, all traditional photography course, and it was very, very creative. We had many different teachers. We were exposed to many different, interesting processes with film and all kinds of different things. And one of the things that we were asked to do was experiment with multiple negatives. And I created an image, Legacy 1, with a female form sort of sleeping under a dump. And that was created in the darkroom from 2 pieces of film. I'd been to the local dump, taken some photos there, and then the woman was actually a sculpture that was at our school. And the 2 of those images came together as something of an accident. Just looking through a library of images and saying, all right, well, what could we play with here? What could we mix? And when those 2 images came together, there was a bit of an aha moment that a number of interests of mine kind of came together. The photography came together with this statement about what we do to Mother Nature, what we do to planet Earth, that impact, which was so visible, and my interest in the feminine form, and that all those things kind of came together, and it seemed unusual, it seemed different, it seemed like an unusual way to shock people into thinking, but also into feeling. And I think that's a really important part of the kind of images I'm making now. A, they're unusual, and B, having that feminine figure there to sort of personify the earth, I think really helps people identify with it and to feel something. And I think that's really key thing that's sort of missing in the way we look at environmental issues. We're looking at it in a very intellectual way, and I think until we really feel it somehow personally, that we're very unlikely to make any changes in our lives. So, but that was one of the aha moments when I was at school and studying photography, and basically having a lucky accident. And every image that I've made since then has built upon that one image. I was shown his work at school at the same time. I'm not sure if it was before or after that accident, but I was aware of his work at my time at school. Yes, and it's pretty wonderful stuff. I think his stuff is stream of consciousness and very dreamlike. Mine has a much more specific message, I would say, but it's certainly incredible work. Wonderful mystery to a lot of his images. After the aha moment, I thought, okay, well, how else can I explore this idea of how do we impact the planet? So I basically started making like a list. Okay, well, what do? We throw garbage. And then one of the next things that came to mind was the idea of pollution and air pollution in particular. And not too far away from me is the city with quite a lot of smokestacks. And so I had the very strong image in my mind. It just came to me quite quickly. Some of the images are very experimental. It's like, you pick this and then you try it with another image and it works or it doesn't work. But the Legacy 3, the woman clutching her face in the smokestack, that image came to me quite quickly in my mind, sort of fully formed. And I made a sketch in a notebook that looks remarkably like the photograph. Not that I'm a great visual artist with the pen. And then I drove to Hamilton, shot the smokestack, and then worked with the model and put the two together in the darkroom. And it worked the way I imagined it would. And that was so exciting for me, just to have that idea so fully formed and then actually being able to realize it was really exciting. Well, I would say that I've been really excited to finally find in my life that, I have something that I want to say and I have a way to say it. You go through your life and you go to school and you have no idea what you want to do, and you go off and you travel and you do this and you do that. And I knew that I was always sort of searching for something else. And I really feel like with the combination of photography and bringing some kind of meaningful environmental message to people and making them think and feel in a new way I think it's really important, and it just feels like what I want and need to be doing. So that's a pretty exciting place for me to get to. Yeah, most of us don't react until there's a crisis or something that's deeply personal, and it's wonderful for photographers to show environmental devastation. I think that's a very important thing. But I'm starting to realize that motivating people beyond just that basic awareness, I think, is an important step as well. And I think art is a really good way to do that.